Hello. I'm pretty excited about this one. But then I usually am excited about the Friday Lives because I always have enthusiasms, don't I? So I have a new enthusiasm thanks to somebody else mentioning this to me. And I'm going to mix talking about that new enthusiasm with an old enthusiasm because the two go very well together. And the old enthusiasm is these inks. So, if you have been watching the channel for a while, you know that I love ink. I use watercolor, but I like ink because when I started buying and using inks, um, I just felt that the intensity of ink colors and the way ink sits on paper and everything, I loved it, and it was very um, exciting because you get an ink like India ink and you can do all kinds of weird effects with it, that some of which are very spontaneous, but I was sort of coming up with my own effects, that I kind of made up these effects. But I had been looking at, I think it's called Nihonga painting, a Japanese style of painting, and it's very specific in the way that you mix things and everything. And some of the materials are expensive for it. There's particularly a kind of a powder that you use that's made from oyster shells that are sort of, maturing for 12 years and then ground up very carefully. And it's expensive, but they give these kind of wonderful sort of cloudy effects over watercolor. And I was looking at all this kind of stuff and getting incredibly inspired by it and finding uses for it in my own work. And this is some of the work from last year, and I feel it really pushed my work in new directions that were very exciting directions for me. And a lot of the things I ended up having to do little workarounds, like um, instead of oysters, I ended up getting various sorts of powders to use and experimenting with those and putting those on as layers. And in fact, I've forgotten to take out the powders because one of the powders, and I don't know where I put it. One of the powders I thought I might use today, which is around somewhere, but I'm always doing this, haven't I? Forgetting something and then going off doing something else. But it's not unlike this, which is a mica powder, kind of a stone of some sort. Um, That's actually used in bath bombs, but it's slightly iridescent, and I was using that in with different effects as well. I was using glitter in watercolor as well, and I was making up mixtures of things like this. Um, that is a binding medium for watercolor, and indeed would work for making inks as well. But it is this stuff, gum arabic. So that was last year. I was doing all these kinds of experiments, and I actually make a great mix that I really love with this. This is violin glue that it's kind of a made from some sort of skin. Rabbit skin is the sort of glue that I would be most familiar with, but it is a works like a varnish, right? So you can mix in all sorts of powders and varnishes and things like that. So I was doing all that kind of thing. But it was at around that time that I got into using inks as well, because I was getting the underneath colors very, very vibrant with ink, and then doing varnishing things over them. And it was the fact that you didn't really know what was going to happen that was making it all so exciting. And I had inks like this. This was from a fairly cheap calligraphy set. The nibs and everything that I got in it weren't particularly good. And This ink, though, was a wonderful colour. It was a very intense kind of an ultramarine blue. And I was just looking up this brand of ink, and they make printer inks mostly, this company. And I couldn't get that same ink in a bottle where I was looking. But it's a very intense blue. That has to be, I have to get that really intense blue again. But I'm talking so much about inks because I got a new ink, didn't I? And it just arrived this morning. So this ink is a new brand I haven't used before, Diamine or Diamine. I don't know how you pronounce it. It's made in the UK, and it's a fountain pen ink. And the color was what really attracted me to this. But it's supposed to be good quality ink as well. So I think it'd be nice in my collection. And it doesn't hurt that the bottle is so beautiful. I get in all these fetishes for for ink bottles because I think because they're things that people have out on their desks. Often companies want to make the ink bottle very beautiful, so they come in beautiful shapes. And this one has all these lovely bumps on each side, and it's very beautiful. Even the packaging is beautiful on it. But the color is what I'm interested in because this is called Aurora Borealis. And to me, it's very hard when you're looking online at things, but to me, it looked like a night sky color that was kind of an indigo color with, the intensity of a touch of cobalty kind of a blue or an ultramarine in it as well. So I haven't tested that or anything. I'm leaving that to test that today. So fresh out of the box. The box, I'll probably throw the box away, even though the box is very pretty. I don't really have any use for the box. I suppose you could make a bookmarker or something. Sometimes I cut things up and tuck them into books and I find them years later. It is pretty though, isn't it? So we'll see how that ink goes. It got very good reviews online, and the bottle gets a good review already, doesn't it? And I have all my inks lined up on a shelf, and they look very pretty all lined up because even that cheap one there, um, they just are a beautiful shape. They're optimized for dipping your pen in, and I don't always do that. Sometimes I actually have to buy little tiny funnels. I sometimes funnel them off, and because I might like to use them watered down sometimes, you see, if I'm painting with them, rather than, I'd put them in containers like that, rather than just using them full strength all the time, as somebody who's using them for fountain pens might do. So although they're calligraphy inks, right? I'm using them for painting as well as doing a bit of calligraphy because I do a bit of calligraphy as well. But I mixed up some of this stuff, which is the gum Arabic, in case I want to try doing one of my powdered layers on top of it, right? So we might try something like that. But I have other things I want to show you as well. Um, some of them are the drawings that I did during the week because not everybody watches my shorts. Some people like just watching short videos, and other people like watching both the longer videos, the live streams, and the short videos. And then other people might only like the lives, other people might only like the video uploads. We're all very individual in our tastes. It's like I don't read too many short stories, I prefer a novel at the moment anyway. And I have always been a little bit like that about short stories. They end too soon for my liking. But in the shorts during the week, I uploaded me out painting, and the weather has been horrendous for painting, right? I'm so glad I went on the camping trip when I did. You might have seen the video upload where I went on an overnight camping trip recently, and I'm so glad I did it because it was like the one good day for the next few weeks. So weather-wise, it's been horrible since then, really horrendous. And one of the days that the weather was particularly horrible, I struggled out anyway to go and paint because it started off just really, really cloudy. And I thought, yeah, it's going to be rain showers today. So I might get out on my new little company vehicle, the e-bike, dear Ting Ting with the melodious bell. Um, I went out in Ting Ting and got to the spot quite quickly and said, okay, well, I might get a bit of painting in before it rains. But I didn't. It started raining immediately. And everything got very flooded. So I had to finish some of these when I came home. But these are ink, right? Because the last ink that I got arriving was this India ink, Bombay brand, which is a very popular brand in that. And I had been using Speedball Black India ink, which is fantastic stuff. And I am at the moment experimenting with changing my brand of India ink and very nervous about the whole thing because I love Speedball so much, but it's expensive. But I did want to try a sepia toned India ink, and you can get India ink in a few different colors. Now, I thought that the brown didn't seem as shellacky as the black India ink, so it doesn't have the same varnishy feel to it when you're painting with it. But color wise, it's lovely. And the Bombay thing is nice because it comes with that little dropper lid, which I really like. That's really nice for painting because if you have a little tiny palette like this kind of thing, you can just eyedropper out a few drops, you know. And you know, ink isn't necessarily cheap, so you want to go easy on it, you know. But so I thought I'd just show you these while we're talking about inks before I start anything new. And uh, this greenish coloured piece here, I have two that have that greenish tone on them, and that's because when I was on the camping holiday, there were a couple of pieces of paper in my small sketch pad that at the end of the night I had gouache left on a palette. And I just got a couple of sheets of the sketch pad and flooded the paper with water and then pressed the sketch pad face down in the palette so that it would pick up any of the remaining gouache. And my thinking was that the next day, when it dried the next day, I might be able to um, do some sort of a drawing on top of it and have that sort of neutral toned background, which had greens and browns and it all kind of mixed already from doing landscape colours. And as it worked out, I didn't use that on the camping trip at all. But those pages actually fell out. It was a very cheap sketch pad, and the pages fell out of the sketch pad. And I brought that sketch pad with me on this rainy day when I went out, thinking, oh yeah, well I'll just draw something on those sheets now. And sometimes when I mess up my materials a little bit or get the materials a bit marked up, I kind of like it because it frees you up a lot that you don't mind if you mess up further, you see, and you're not too precious and careful about the way you go about things. And this one, although I didn't get to do very much in situ, when I came home, and it ended up turning out quite nice, I thought, because there were accidental effects from the rain I really liked. So I would not have got these kind of effects unless I was using a water-based medium, obviously, but it was ink I was using on top of gouache, basically. So these bits are all the ink, and it's this sepia colored ink. So there is something else added to it. When I got home, I had, you're not going to believe what this paint is. I just pick up paints from various places, right? And I had a little set that was a model making set for, uh, it was a plane, I think. And this was a little bronze acrylic that came with it. So on my painting, and I don't know if you can see it, there are little bits of bronze in there as well. So that's from my Airfix set. I never got the little plane completely made up, but I saved the paint out, so I still have that paint. And I do like the iridescent things because apart from anything else, there are certain things they're really nice for, and they are nighttime sky effects. Um, I did a crow, um, painted a crow once and had iridescent feathers on him. Um, so rainy kind of effects. There's actually a little bit of glitter in that as well. So it's very much a mixed media. But how I got the glitteriness and everything to stay on was using a varnish. So that's one of the varnishes I use for doing that, right? And another thing I use is that binder medium there, the gum arabic. If it's a watercolor and I'm wanting to mix in some um, something glittery or something extra into the paint or something powdered. So that's how I get to do it. And one of the varnishes that's one of my favorite ones for over watercolors, and one I used for this one is acrylic medium varnish. That's a gloss medium, but actually the paper absorbed so much of it, it doesn't come out really glossy. It just comes out nice. It doesn't plasticky or anything. So and then all this kind of weird outlining effect and everything, which it can look quite complicated. It's not at all. It's because there was so much water on the paper. But when I put the ink down, the ink flooded outwards on the paper and it became dark in some areas and just left just the very edges in other areas. And I thought that was very attractive. So really what I like doing is when something semi-accidental like that happens, working with it a little bit. And I did keep the figurative element going in it because I did all the trees and divisions of fields and everything. I let go a little bit of trying to get it super realistic because there were mountains in the background, and in this one, they're actually in it a bit more. But this one, the foreground, I let go of some of the detail of the foreground, you see. So you can choose what to kind of focus on. This one has no background color going on it at all, but it is still exploiting the idea of the rainy day kind of idea because when I came back, and you can see it on the short video, I might link you to the short video underneath in the comments afterwards, just in case you're not sure which video it is. I'm sure rain was mentioned in the title of it though. But in this one, the what I was left with when it was lashing rain, right? I couldn't even get this to dry to be able to work more into it. So what I was left with was a sheet of paper that was just variegated kind of tones with big splashes on it, where it kept raining on top of it. I didn't even have any shelter particularly. Luckily, I had a very good rainproof bike jacket on at the time, so I wasn't very wet, but it wasn't great for my materials. But I did manage to get these home safely by getting a sheet of watercolor paper and laying it on top of this and then closing the sketch pad down. So it didn't actually get too much damage to the page. But this work happened when I got home, and you can see there are splashes, splash effects. There's a little bit of drawing, a little bit of painting, and I used a fairly fine watercolor brush for that when I got home to achieve that. And then also my beloved calligraphy pen, that's called an oblique calligraphy pen for putting in some of the smaller details. And then I left some of the white bits page because they enlivened it. So I don't think that's the most interesting piece, but I thought that was an interesting piece. I liked that one. And then this one was kind of interesting as well, although it's a bit more uptight. But this one has a layer of that powder on it, the titanium oxide powder, which is just the that's just the powder that you would get in paint. That's the pigment for paint. Like if you have oil paint, they add like linseed oil and whatever their binder is, and uh, the binder holds all the powder together and it makes like your titanium white paint. So that's just it in powdered form, basically. And that's it mixed with this gum arabic, which is a very, like a kind of a honey consistency. And in fact, in watercolors, they do use honey based watercolors. So that binds it together. But the other way you can use it, and I can't remember, actually, I think this is the way I did it, is that acrylic varnish. I think it might have been the acrylic medium. I used that in with it and did a little layer stippled in, which just means kind of scratching it in like that with the brush. And the reason I used that rather than gum arabic was I didn't want it to flow really well. I wanted to do clouds and I wanted them to have that consistency that is more powder gathering in some areas than in others. And with this stuff, you can get really interesting effects if you wait until it starts getting a bit tackier and then mush your brush around more. You can get interesting clumps of things happening. So um, it's all very exciting, and ink is very exciting. And this technique here is generally speaking called pen and wash, because you do a little wash of your ink color. And again, it was that India ink brown. And then you come in with your pen and you do your detailing work. So you can see both things happening there. And the wash establishes tonal areas really quickly. It's great for landscape. And then you can pick out details with the pen. And Rysdale and people like that, 17th century Dutch landscape people, they're really worth looking at for pen and ink work. Some of their work is fantastic. Um, so I love doing this kind of work. I find it just quick in the landscape because you've got a quick change in scene, and also the amount of detail you can get into it if you want is very interesting. And then you can do other special effects on it, like that powder stuff, like putting in that bronze acrylic paint on top of it. All kinds of things you can do with it. So it's very and then there's gouache underneath it as well. So it really is a mixed media thing. So these are they really fire up your imagination. So speaking of firing up your imagination, the other thing I'm going to show you before we try out the ink, and this section of the video, I'm thinking I might add chapters to the video afterwards just for this section, because this section of the video has a bug warning in it. The bugs being live bugs. Not everybody likes insects, right? Some people, insects give them the heebie-jeebies. And I will be showing some live insects in this section of the video. However, I'm going to tell you before I show you the insects, so I won't just spring an insect on you suddenly, okay? I am first going to show you a new and very artistic hobby that I think you'll find interesting, and that is terrariums, okay? And you might know what a terrarium is, but just in case you don't, um, I'm gonna tell you what they are, and I'm going to show you my first terrarium, which was I started around last Christmas time. And this is a semi-open terrarium, but actually a terrarium is some sort of a glass container that you have plant life in that is closed normally. but you can have them as closed as you want, completely sealed, or semi-open, or open completely at the top. And you put all your plants in. And the reason I'm talking about these is that I think that for artists, they're so wonderfully interesting a thing, because artists walk around looking at stuff a lot, don't they? I'm always oohing and ahhing about little natural world things. And uh, this terrarium here, this air plant, I didn't source this locally. I bought it, but a lot of the plants in this I source locally. There are mosses and things in it, and there's actually this air plant which is only fed by air via its leaves. So you need one of these mist spray things. Um, this sits on an oyster shell in the middle, but the thing that's interesting about it is it's kind of what you'd call a little tableau, right? A little scene. And artists love little scenes, making up a scene and doing compositions and exploring things and looking at the world as if it's a composition, right? So obviously this is going to appeal to me. But these are also fantastic things for drawing, it occurred to me. And I hadn't kind of made a terrarium from scratch with found materials yet. I had some found materials in this one, but the other day, yesterday, it was lashing rain, absolutely lashing, and I've been sort of holed up in the house a bit, which is fine because I have a lot of household stuff I'm doing. I painted the kitchen. I'm making a fabulous, actually, shelf in the bathroom that's made from a found piece of wood. And I'm doing all sorts of less interesting cleaning things in the house, you know. But I managed to get out yesterday, even though it was absolutely lashing rain, and got all my wet things, my wet clothing on, my best raincoat and everything, because I specifically wanted to collect stuff for a terrarium. And the making of the terrarium was kind of an artistic thing in itself, right? But it's also the made terrarium is going to be terribly interesting, I think, for my art practice. So this is why I'm talking about it to you, because it's an arty thing and this is an arty channel. Uh, so no bugs yet, hopefully. There are a couple of bugs in this, but I don't think they're going to jump out if I open the lid. This is the first terrarium I made just from found things, okay? And if I take the lid off there, you can see it's got ferns in it and mosses down here. So hopefully you can see those okay. It's a bit hard for me to tilt it perfectly because I don't want things to start sliding around. But I've got all sorts of interesting things, different mosses like this one, which apparently is liverwort, which I had never noticed that before, but I have so many mosses around the neighborhood. When you go out specifically looking for something for a terrarium, um, you notice so many things you didn't notice before. And I'm so lucky. In a way, I don't feel lucky sometimes when I want to paint and the flash and rain, but I'm lucky to be able to get mosses, as many different types of mosses as I want, and ferns for these things totally free. So, it depends on where you are in the world, but there are quite a lot of things that will go into a terrarium. And it is a closed thing because this goes on, right? And the idea is that, okay, you're going to open it every few weeks just for maintenance and cleaning any algae or anything that gets on the side. But you could close this and you've got a closed ecosystem in there. So you can see how arty types would love this because it's very godlike creation of your own, and you've got this whole little world that you're watching in there. So how wonderful to be able to watch this thing grow and change and everything. If it works, because people make mistakes with their first terrariums, and one mistake that would be the most probable one for this to fail would be that I've overwatered. That apparently is one of the worst things you can do because you get mold and rot on things. However, and the bug section is coming up now. So, for anybody who doesn't want to see bugs, I'll be warning you now in a second. But I'll show you the second terrarium first before we do that, because I had enough materials left over to do a second one. And I've been sort of doing them in this way that they have a little kind of path down the middle. But obviously, you would have to go in there every month or two because the path gets a bit hidden, and you'd have to do some maintenance, cutting things that are growing and everything, you know. But from the point of view of painting it, look what happens when I put a light in behind it. And you're actually supposed to have LED lights on these rather than natural light. It becomes this beautiful little world. And you can see how interesting and fantastic that would be for painting. And you have the advantage that you have it right in front of you in your studio up close, and you can become really very absorbed in doing this. And there's so many layers and everything in this. It's so interesting. And these are very cheap containers, free actually, but if they thrive, okay, I'll give them a few weeks. I'll give them like a month, say. And if they do okay, I might treat myself to, they have terrariums for sale online that are um they're fishbowl shaped, and they have a cork at the top to seal them. And underneath the cork, they have a little LED light that shines down inside. So you could be sitting there at night, all snuggy on a rainy night, reading your book, and you look up, and on a shelf beside you, you've got this wonderful little world that's like a little forest or something. And it's so beautiful and arty and everything and inspiring, you know. So, and of course, you know, for me, all these little plants, it gives me a chance to observe them really, really close up, and all kinds of fantastic things like this little moss, or it might even be a lichen because moss and lichen are related. It's got little trumpets on it, little trumpets coming out of the actual moss, which I hadn't noticed until I looked at it really, really close. And then when you're gathering stones and things like that, individual stones are so beautiful, but you don't notice them in amongst the busyness of all the other things you're looking at in a big landscape. So this is a way of bringing the scale down really, really small, and finding uh, what's so beautiful about every individual element, and then, of course, making your own weird little landscape in there, because that is a little landscape. And I even saw somebody on online, and she wasn't doing it with terrariums now, but she was making little fairy houses out of natural materials, and you could so do things like that. You could have a little fairy house up here on the top of the hill. But the bug bit is coming up now, folks, because what you need to do, I just put the date on the top of these so that I'll know when I get to kind of milestones. So the first milestone for this would be a month. We'll see if it's still alive after a month, you know. So we'll revisit that. I'll give you updates and just tell you how it's doing. Now, I would go in for maintenance every couple of weeks, but um, the bugs I'm going to show you now, are going to stop me going in too often, because I found last night this small one here. I redid that one twice yesterday because I was enjoying doing it so much that I pulled it apart twice and redid it. And I thought, oh my God, I'll be doing this every day. I'll become kind of obsessed with my terrarium and messing with my terrarium and won't be able to leave it alone. Then I realized, no, because if you want an ecosystem going on in here, you have to introduce specific sorts of little bugs in there to do cleanup operations on um, moldy green mold and stuff that'll grow on it, um, unless they're working away in there, you see. And it adds another element to your little world, because they turn up in it then, and you can see them all crawling around. And they happen to be free where I live as well, because I have a compost heap, and they're in my compost heap already. So the bug warning is for this section. Okay, so anybody that doesn't like insects, look away now, because I'm going to show you bugs in a bag. Okay, and these bugs in a bag, they're going into both these terrariums, so they're going to keep me from poking into the terrarium on a daily basis, because these bugs, most of them, are called springtails. And hopefully you can get a good close up on that. That guy there is a springtail. He looks like he's just walking along. But in compost heaps, uh, you go near those guys, they go boing and they jump around the place. But you put them in your terrarium, and they do a lovely cleanup job, and they feed on any dead material in there, because, like, all your plants and everything have a life cycle. So they'll feed on all the dead stuff, just like on the forest floor. And but obviously, I'm not going to want to open things up. This guy here freaked me out. He is like something out of the movie Alien. And I was looking him up online, and I forget what they were calling him, but he's not. I don't think he's that common. He's a shrimp-looking fella, but he's a hopper, some sort of hopper. But I don't think he's that common. But he is fairly repulsive looking and much bigger than the other guys. But I just couldn't resist um the idea of putting him in, because I'm dying to see what happens with him. He looks like he's got a plan. He burrows to the bottom of this and looks like he wants to stay there for quite a while. So I don't know what he's up to. Um, I do have other things. I have a couple more containers with things I caught. One of them is a centipede, a little tiny centipede, who's gorgeous. But you're not supposed to have more than one centipede in your terrarium. I don't know how it stands with spiders and ants and things like that, but I do have guys that get along in this thing. So I should also have, if I can find any to show you, woodlice in here. They're the other cleanup guys. And if you're wondering where I got all this if you're wondering where I got all this information just from yesterday, it was from a guy who has a channel called Serpa Designs, or Serpa Design, can't remember which. And he was showing you how to do a beginner terrarium for free. So so they're gonna go in to those two for helping clean up and everything. But I think they're going to turn up in my artwork, because I think that I'm going to be wanting uh, to draw and paint what's going on. But there's also a bonsai element to that kind of a hobby, because um, there's a management that goes on every few weeks, obviously, for cutting things back, so that you don't end up with just things growing green up the side if you have a successful terrarium, you see, and end up with a big wall of green. So we'll see whether I have overwatered it or not. But if you wanted instructions for doing that, his channel would be a good place to start. Um, And apparently the most important layer in this is your drainage layers. So you've got a big layer of pebbles in the bottom, and then you actually have a little bit of kind of screening material here, a mesh that separates the pebbles from what you call your substrate soil. And your substrate soil is actually a kind of it's like a forest bed kind of material that is made up of sphagnum moss, dry sphagnum moss, and a few filtery, drainagey things like charcoal. Like I'd made charcoal recently in my back garden, so I put some charcoal in that layer, and um, I used compost heap soil, but sometimes people buy the soil and everything. So that's my new terribly interesting hobby, and it'll be awfully disappointing if they fail. I'll know in a few weeks whether they failed or not. But if they fail, I'll know why. I'll know, okay, I just overwatered them because I do have a suspicion I slightly overwatered them. You just want to have the soil just barely damp kind of thing, not totally waterlogged. But we'll see. We'll see, did I get away with it? So let's test the ink. And yeah, we'll get back to that another time. I put those away. So I am gonna find some way of lighting those LED wise. I might need to. I do have a couple of stick-on LED lights, which I might need to take from elsewhere to get onto these. Um, but they do need that kind of lighting because daylight is too strong for them. So I want to make sure that if they die, that's not the reason why they died. Not that they're going to get sunshine that's too strong at the moment. Okay, so I have two kinds of paper that I'm going to test this out on. My beloved watercolor paper, which is this sheet is a bit dirty, but don't worry about the insects now. We're finished with the insects. I won't be showing you those again. They're even out of the shot. Yeah, you don't have to. There's no way you're going to see any more of those. And don't worry about them because they all have air holes in them and they're going to go into their little forests in a little while now. So this paper is not the cleanest, but what we're doing is we're just testing this ink for color and consistency to see what kind of, it won't be a kind of what you call a granulating ink because it's fountain pen ink. But I want to see like what depth and what consistency it has. And I also want to test it on my new sort of paper, the rag cotton, because the rag cotton is very interesting for anything. And then we might do a little layer of this. If we can get it to dry, we might do a little layer of this. I've only a few minutes left anyway. So I'm going to get a kind of big-ish brush out for this. And we're going to just go in with Neato. So this again, this is the Diamine ink. Oh my God, this color looks so beautiful already. Ooh. See what I mean? It is a very indigo kind of color. Isn't that beautiful? That is so beautiful. That just makes me happy. Oh, look, we've got accidental stars happening already because I did want to do a starry sky. And we've got it happening completely by accident. Isn't that beautiful? Don't want to mess it around too much. That's the nice thing about these sort of brushes. these kind of Chinese sumi style brushes. You can get interesting draggy effects with them. Let's see how that layers. So it is about experimentation. And there is another experiment I want to do. I want to mix this with a different color, and specifically with the brown that I had. So that is so beautiful. So you can see how that would be lovely for a night sky. It is a bit greener than a night sky. And if I wasn't being super mean with this thing, I'd be tempted to mix it. Well, we won't be too. Okay, so this is it mixed with the other blue. Don't like that as much. It is bluer. Definitely. So you see how a tiny little bit of a mix makes a difference. Let's try a little tiny bit of brown. But there's, the intensity of inks oh, this is not, look at that. I'm going to go too nuts with water now. Yeah. Just the amount of mileage you get out of ink. And you see how just letting it do its own thing and pull and everything, it can be just lovely. And then something like that can turn into a lovely landscape. That could be a beautiful kind of bit of land with night clouds or something on it. So some of the kind of cauliflower and cabbaging effect of things is wonderful. You don't necessarily hate that. So let's try it on other papers. So there's the pure color, and it is a thing of beauty, I have to say. And it just to compare it, my other blue was rather like this lapis lazuli color blue. And the reason I had my lapis lazuli stone out was that I was thinking with terrariums that they might be very nice to have some of my crystal stones in. And I have wonderful things like this obsidian wouldn't that be fabulous in a terrarium? So if I get the hanger terrariums properly, I can put these kind of stones in and they would be wonderful. And they would also be helping me to clean the house because I don't have as many things then in different little tiny places. I have them sort of, collected in. And I don't mind doing terrariums and having a few jars of things around the place because you'll always find room for a jar somewhere. It's not like a messy thing. So, what a nice hobby. So, I'm going to leave that to do its thing. I could do this kind of thing. See, I could come in and pick up bits of this, but I'd like it, keep running it around. See, it changes. The thing about this is not India ink now, but the things about inks, and it would be particularly true of India ink. Um, and the brown India ink is behaving a bit differently to this fountain pen ink. Now, if you notice, that's where the cauliflower effect is happening. But the thing about India ink in particular is that as it dries, it can do quite different things from when it's wet. I'm going to just run that in there. Don't want to mess it around too much, but at the same time, do work it. because I'm not liking the squareness of what's happening there. Don't know if this means that that India ink is not going to be very nice used in conjunction with that kind of ink, that the two don't really like being used together, or what it means. Well, I'm not particularly enjoying that effect, so I'm trying to do something a bit drawn looking, lose a few of the edges. So it's like watercolor because you can pick up certain bits. Well, that's nice. A bit rainstormy looking. You see, you can get nice effects, and then the effect can disappear as it's on the way to drying. So, certain amount of messing with it as you go along is allowable. And one could go in there, you see, I want to do some pictures that are really, really dark, that the theme is night sky. Okay. So this one, I might work into it again with black and move from my black indie ink into this really deep greeny blue. And this patch here with the brown is very nice. I just don't like the edges of it very much, but with black India ink, having that modulate into black India ink might be nice. So I'm going to leave that to dry. And there is another thing you can do with that paper, which I don't have the stuff to do it, but you know, if as it's drying your paper buckles slightly, you can prepare your paper in such a way that that doesn't happen. And how you would prepare it is wet the entire paper first, give it a little soak, and then you have this it looks like packing tape, only it's paper and it's gummed on one side, and you gum it down to a drawing board, and then you allow the paper, your watercolor paper, to dry. This only works with good quality thick watercolor paper. So you allow the paper to dry, so it stretches the paper. You see, as it dries. So when you're flooding it with your watercolor, it's not going to, the paper isn't going to start buckling up because the paper's already stretched, and the tape, taping it down around the edge, is holding it, you see. So that's a thing you can do if you uh, have problems like that and they're driving you nuts. I don't get it too much, so I just haven't bought the tape yet, but I might one of these days. But you know, there's so many different art materials you can get, and then you see, like, if you're somebody like me with all these weird hobbies, you know, you have all these things that you go, oh, I have to get that first. Like the camping thing, I had to replace stuff from camping. I think I'll flood this with water first because we know this likes a lot of water, and it's quite a jolly pale green at the moment. But I think that's because I forgot that I had some of this ink in it. So I might actually have another one where it's just the pure color. I'll do that on the opposite page because I want to get one where the reading of color is fairly accurate for that paper. So I'm going to use this. This is my new Tea Fixes Everything camping mug. So I had to get some camping supplies that even at that I have to change that water here. That I'd lost up the mountains. So, like, even that hobby is not cheap, but it's wonderful to find the terrarium hobby because, you know, being able to do it basically free. I mean, you know, if I got really into them, I'd find I'd be fine. I'd be buying, you know, fancy gravel and things like that. But there's so much of the terrarium that I can make free that it's a wonderful hobby for me. I love it. So remind me, I said that in a few weeks now, if I fail miserably to get them to thrive. But I think it's just fine to tune the water, really, because things like that, they want to grow, you know. But the bugs are a very important element of it. Okay, so now we're going to do the just plain ink. Oh my goodness. I love that colour. I'm glad it was very like the colour looked online. You cannot judge colours by just looking at them online. Look at it on that paper, though. That paper is so incredible. I shouldn't really be doing that. I'm dipping back into the bottle after coming into the water. I'm watering down my ink base. Look at that. That makes me so happy. This paper was a very good buy because it's a great paper for experimenting on. And the texture of it is so beautiful that you could just flood it with a thing like this and you've got a painting already. But as it happens, I have a painting with some nice stars in it now, just by leaving some in. And I did want to use some of that stuff, didn't I? But can I get any of the other things dry enough to do that? It's not very starlight. Just leaving the higher up ones as stars. Am I out of the picture? I'm sorry, I'm moving and on and I'm completely out of the picture. And there are actually people watching, so they're going, what is she doing? She's not even in the picture. There, look. Look at that. See, that one has the other ink in it, but this is just the pure color. So that color is called Aurora Borealis, and it's so beautiful. On my screen, that looks a little bit more French ultramarine color than indigo. But I don't know. I don't know what it'll turn up like when it goes onto my computer screen, you know. But oh gosh, it's so beautiful. And there is a really beautiful granulation happening on that paper as well. So it's just making me very happy. You know, to be able to do that in watercolor, the amount of watercolor you'd have to mix up to do that. And of course, watercolor, you tend to have little tiny pans in it, don't you? So I think this is probably what I love about ink so much, that you can just dip in and there's this huge coverage. Ooh, let's do this. Look. Oh, you see, who wouldn't love that about ink? Wow. Wow. Look, isn't that nice? See, with ink, there's always a lot of ooh, ah. When stuff happens, it's just so beautiful. So isn't that wonderful? So I'm going to leave that bit to dry, and I'll see if any can dry. And if it yeah, might get another layer or something on here before we go. It's just past 3, but I think we can do it. So I need a little plate of some description for this and my funny little spoon. I don't know how this will go. I would have preferred to use the violin glue, but the violin glue, it has to have very hot, not quite boiling water in it, and then be used within a few minutes of being mixed because it goes dry very fast. So obviously I didn't want to do that because it necessitated being in the kitchen and I didn't want to get my timing wrong and everything on it. So I said, no, okay, we'll do the gum arabic thing. So this is basically what, you know, if you're making your own pigments, this is how you do it. The gum arabic is the binder. And then you can add in as much or little water as you want to it to get the consistency you want. So if you want just chunky bits, there is going to be a little bit of blue, but see that? Or if you want um, more flow, more water, you just have more water in it. And so imagine I'm painting clouds in a night sky. That could be a very nice thing. Now the ink is going to reanimate, so you have to be kind of okay with that. And I don't know, can I do it? But there is a thing you can do with this, yeah, where you just get, you literally get there, powder and flood it. So some of that is dry powder, but if I and would lift again. But if I came back, right, and I let that dry, then I came back with my layer of varnish, that would work. Now I'm going to get a dry brush and just do peculiar things. So you can see how this lends itself to a nice experimentation, yeah? But I found that with the varnish, right, if you put a layer of varnish over things afterwards, that it brings out the beauty of the color even more. So I really like that. And then there are other things you can do uh, to further experimentation and lift with tissue. Or you could even layer with tissue or um, tracing paper onto this, you know. So all sorts of experimentation can go on. But isn't the ink gorgeous? I love it. Oh, look. So, I mean, I started with the idea of a night sky, but obviously that's not, you know, it's not a very good representation of a night sky, but it is interesting. And you can keep layering onto things and doing things. I mean, I could do a moon in there if I wanted to, but I do actually have sort of two moons. But the thing I liked about this technique was the softness that you got around the edges of things was very attractive, I thought. So there we are. Don't want to infect the ink. Where is my calligraphy brush? Just before we go, the final stroke I want to do with the calligraphy. And this is why I end up decanting things, because I can never get the brush white into this properly. I want to get reestablished a bit there. So kind of fun that I can have with this, but can do all sorts of mixing with my other colors as well, which I like. But the challenge is to not get the color in that bottle too infected. So this is why I might get a couple of little funnels for decanting off that into different bottles. And if I end up with stuff like this in a terrarium, see, that color paint might come in very handy indeed, don't you think? For doing wonderful stones like that. I love that stone so much. Okay, I better go, but I can't stop messing with this. But there are nice little effects in this miniature painting, because we ended up with all kinds of different blues and little bits of. Don't really like what happened down there. That blue is too blue. With the titanium white, it brings it up a lot more ultramarine blue, which I wouldn't necessarily be completely sold on. Still, it's a highly successful ink. I do like it. It's very inspiring. So I hope you liked that. I hope you liked the idea of hearing about the terrariums and things as well. I hope the bug thing didn't bug you too much. And as I say, I will put chapters on so that you know how to avoid the bugs if you want to. So I'm gonna see how they're getting on now. Put them in the terrarium, and that'll stop me from opening the terrarium every day and rearrange it. So thanks very much for joining me, and see you again soon.